That's Spike Smokes.
Oh, hey, well, I got you two on here. She mentioned the town was called Randall. Is that in the United States or Canada?
United States.
States.
Oh, okay, I want to make sure.
Yeah, just north of Portland.
Wife and I aren't allowed in Canada, so.
What happened?
It's a long story and it's an old story, but Canada doesn't.
Spike, that this is recorded and there's a bunch of people online.
Oh, they're already here. All right. Yeah, we don't have that much time for the story. Look at that.
Sorry, everyone, for ruining the juicy story that was coming.
Bummer.
You have to join the culinary committee to hear that story.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a surge of people for our next meeting.
Yep. Just to hear Spike's scandalous story.
Right.
And then I got a lot of those stories, but tonight is not the night for those.
No. Talking about food tonight.
Is the chat open for everyone? I hope so. I know we've had issues in the past.
I'm a presenter tonight, just to let you know, so I'm gonna be a little occupied the next few hours. Yeah, this is my little. You can say hi to everybody. Yeah, come on camera. It's right here.
No.
That's not my wife, by the way. That's the other woman. Wife will be home.
I am the roommate.
She'll be home in a few minutes, I'm sure.
That's awesome. I like that a lot.
Hey. Be all fancy for this presentation. It's all continental wide and stuff, you know.
Whoa. That's fun.
Okay, I think I figured out the chat. Anyone want to tell me right into the chat if we'll see if others can do it. There we go. Okay, we figured it out. We're good. So everyone, please feel free to let us know where you are signing in from. It'd be interesting, always interesting to know where people are coming in from. Jessica, Wisconsin. Julie from California. We know Julie. Thousand Oaks, Oregon. South Carolina, San Antonio, Texas. Couple of North Carolinas, more North Carolinas. Alberta, fellow Canadian. Ontario, fellow Ontarian. John Wheeler, you have a question. Feel free to turn on your camera, turn on your mic, and ask a question. Unless it was a mistake, then you could just lower your hand. All right. Guess not. All right. Minnesota, Alberta again. What else we got? Just send an email to you.
Oh, that was meant to go to Melody. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, she asked me a question.
Outside of DC, where else? I missed some. Illinois, Santa Fe. Jess, did you?
From New England yet, huh? Everybody up here is too busy cleaning their mushrooms. Ha ha ha.
Yep.
What a good week.
Right, good point. Sorry, I'm having a little internal thought process here.
Well, do we want to start with introductions, Robert, while you worked on figuring out chat logistics there?
Well, before I do that, John had a question earlier, but I did not give him permission to talk. So okay. I have just given him permission. John, do you have something to say that you would like to contribute?
No, I don't actually have anything to say. I was just trying to figure out what I was doing here. Thank you.
Gotcha. Fair enough. All right. Yeah, let's do some introductions. Jess, you want to go first?
Mm.
Put you on the spot.
Oh, shoot, me first. Sure. I'm Jess Starwood, and I have been foraging and mushroom hunting for over the last 10 to 15 years. And I wrote a book called Mushroom Wonderland, a forager's guide to finding, identifying, and using more than 25 wild fungi. And I teach classes. I do a lot of culinary stuff. I'm on the culinary committee, obviously, but also heavily involved and on the board for the LA Mycological Society, as well as the Arizona Mushroom Society. And that's me.
All right. Spike, do you want to go next?
Sure, I can. Everybody sees me. Hi, I'm Spike. I live in Rhode Island. I'm a chef in Providence, and I like mushrooms, primarily Amanita. But we're here to answer some of y'all's questions that you might have for the culinary team here at NAMA, so we can do our best. So think about some stuff to say. We got an action-packed night tonight.
Yes, we do.
Gordon, you want to go?
Yeah, hi there. I'm Gordon Walker. I am a PhD biochemist who trained at UC Davis and worked on wine fermentation, but tangentially was looking at yeast. I gained a real appreciation and fascination with fungi as a kid, getting to eat some puffballs and chicken of the woods and morels and truffles, and really became obsessed with eating mushrooms more than anything else. But I forgot about them for about 20 years until I finished grad school, and then I was in New Zealand and became re-obsessed, re-fascinated. And I started a social media account, which now has over 2.5 million followers across platforms worldwide. And I teach people about mushrooms, how to identify them, how to interact with them safely, and also how to cook them. So we'll be looking at some of the cooking videos I've done tonight.
Thank you, Gordon. Gordon's going to be with his video off for this session, unfortunately, but he looks exactly like he looks in his photo there. My name is Robert Courteau. I'm also part of the culinary committee. I believe I'm the sole Canadian on the committee.
Slow your roll, Robert. I am a pseudo-Canadian.
Are you pseudo?
Both my parents are from Ottawa.
Hey!
You'll hear my oots and a boots.
Nice. I like it. I actually responded with A. I didn't even mean to do that. And I started also I have my own Think Fungi, a little organization that I run. I have a little chat here that I can post for all of you. So if you're interested in finding any one of us, there's a whole bunch of links and whatnot that you can find here. So sorry, Jess, yours aren't hyperlinked anymore. They were. You could put in the hyperlinks in the meantime. We did have one question on whether or not this is going to be recorded and shared. We do. This is a recorded session, so keep that in mind if you're going to be turning on your video and asking questions. You are absolutely able to ask questions by chat. There's a Q&A box as well. Q&A allows me to be able to manage the questions a little easier than if everyone's writing in the chat. So if you write in the chat, it might be missed. So just keep that in mind. But this is a very interactive session. We wanted this to be pretty casual with everyone. So when you have questions, we're more than happy to give you permission to turn on your mic. If you would like to turn on your video, feel free to do that as well. You might get muted after your question, just so that a lot of people forget to mute. So you might get muted automatically. But we're more than happy to have you guys join the conversation however you like to do so. So just keep in mind that it is recorded. So if you show your face, that might be on a video recording a little later. And whether how it's going to be available or when it's going to be available, I'm not sure. That is up to the NAMA gods at the top to decide when these things get released. So yeah. Now, that's about it. The format of this evening is going to be pretty relaxed again. Oh, being told it'll be available within a week. There we go. Bam. So you've heard a little bit from us. We're going to go into into a recorded video by our Spike over there, which is going to be today. Today we're having kind of a double theme for this evening. It's going to be, on one hand, it's going to kind of be autumn type foods, but the other thing is they're both rolls, but two different kinds of rolls. So you'll see how those unnote. So we're going to start with Spike's video. After that, we're going to open it up with a little bit of Q&A, so you guys can ask some questions that are related to that video or something you might have seen or something that might have sparked a question. Kind of keeping it casual, like I said, so feel free to kind of ask things that, you know, relate to it. It doesn't have to be exactly about, you know, the recipe. And then we'll be going into another video by Gordon, and then we'll be opening it up again to Q&A to talk about Gordon's video as well as basically anything. And then as the night kind of progresses, we'll see how things kind of unfold, and that'll be kind of our evening tonight. So like I said, you know, watch the videos and feel free to keep in mind any questions that you have and share them afterwards. So I'm going to be I'm going to be screen sharing with all of you so you can watch the video. In the past, sometimes this can get a little confusing. Sometimes the audio doesn't go across very well, or sometimes people experience lag. So as a result, I am putting the link. We put them on as YouTube. Sorry. I'm putting a link to the video on YouTube. So if you're having issues with ours, you can just kind of mute our video, watch it separately through the link, and then rejoin us after the fact. I am reading that there are some issues with copying links from the chat. There's not much I can do about that, unfortunately.
Oh no.
I assume the only one that people might have issues with is Spike's Instagram. Otherwise, you could type it in pretty easily. Again, there's not a whole lot I can do about that, unfortunately. They should be links. They're clickable for me, so hopefully they are for you guys. That's all I can really say. So first video is about to get going, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Hello, everybody. Tonight we're going to be featuring some hedgehog mushrooms, and we will be making Gołąbki's Skolshakium, which is a cabbage roll that we're going to be using with these fantastic little mushroom treats we have in autumn. Now, before we get into the kitchen and start making our dish tonight, I'd like to go over a few identification characteristics while you're in the field. So here we found our flush of hedgehog mushrooms. Rather dull on the cap, really firm too. Now, what makes these unique in hedgehogs is that if you flip them over, the gills are actually spines. They're little teeth on the bottom, giving it that little piney appearance that a hedgehog might have. Here our flush, we can see we have a lot of these going on. Now, one thing that I like to note with these is its color. Also, we want to note its size. We do have a few large ones, but really these are kind of small. Most of them are small. As we flip them over, we can see the teeth on all of them. Do note the cap. It's kind of crooked appearance, not quite round, a little wavy. Here we can see this little belly button on some of these. Oh, I like to call these belly button hedgehogs. They have this little depressed center in the middle. Not all unique. They do have these teeth on the bottom. So other characteristics we want to know is what are they growing on? What are they growing under? And we can see this flush over here, and we can track it going up this little knoll, along these rocks, along the moss, and at the top of this little knoll we see these birch trees. Now, good assessment for this is that this is the good host for these hedgehogs to thrive off of. And we can trace them down, likely on the roots that are under the ground, which stretch all the way across the trail to this river over here. This is a really good habitat for a lot of mushrooms. Having this source of water nearby, the rain helps as well. And you'll notice in the autumn under these birch that we'll find this. Help with birch identification. If you can't see the leaves above, if they're too high, always look on the ground for clues. So I'm going to sit here and collect a few more of these hedgehogs. And then Is we'll my mic on, Robert? get going. If it is, I just want to mention this is Betula lenta, very aromatic with the twigs. Thing I do like
you can
instead of breaking your back picking every mushroom to see if it has teeth, use a mirror.
Oh, hey, that's me talking. Yeah, you snap the
This includes
snap the twigs and
identification
Here.
bit for this recipe. And now we're going to take these off into the kitchen. First thing we want to do is clean them. Now here I got a strainer ready to go. I got my hedgehogs. I have the water dripping just a little bit. So here we've cleaned them pretty good in the field and cut the bases off. We still want to rinse off all the dirt. Any dirt that's stuck on the cap, you can take your thumbnail and fingernails and kind of scrape them away. Also along the stem, we really want to reserve as much of these mushrooms as possible. They can be rather delicate while you're handling them. Some of these you might note in the cleaning process have a little rot to them, so we're just going to stick those aside for now and continue with cleaning the relatively decent ones because that's going to be where most of the work is. Here we can see just a quick brush with your thumbnail gets the dirt off the stem pretty good. And we got all the dirt off. We inspect the teeth, looks good, so we get ready to go. So another thing I wanted to note on these, a lot of times you have the teeth get really dirty. This happens a lot when it rains. The rain hits the ground and knocks the dirt back up into the gills or the teeth in this matter. And here are those rotten ones that we saw on the side. Well, we can only see that it's half rotten. So we'd rather just take a knife, cut off the unsavory pieces, and see what we can salvage. For this recipe, we can use whole, we can use chopped. Anything that's unsavory, we discard. Anything that's questionable, we discard. Sliver off a little bit. Check the inside of the flesh. There's a little bug damage on that, so I'm going to slice off just a little bit more. And there we have a nice clean mushroom. So to start this part of the recipe and process, I heated a pan with some vegetable oil. I'm going to start my onions. Once your onions start getting brown, you'll notice along the edge, give them a little stir, and this is when we want to throw our clean hedgehogs in. Throw them all in at once. And when they're in, we want to give them a little toss. We really want to coat them in the onions and the oil that it was cooked. And we're going to want to continue cooking this on high until they're done. Now here I've added a punch of salt just to help. And you'll notice as you're cooking them, a lot of water comes out of these mushrooms. So this is not a bad thing, but we do want to cook these for this recipe. We do want them on the dry side. So continue stirring and continue cooking. Here we can see the liquids reduced down and starting to crust up on the edge, so we're going to take some brandy. Cautionary warning. Playing with alcohol and heat results in fire, so be warned. Here we're going to finish this with a little pat of butter, toss them up a little bit, and once that flame goes out, we're going to shut it off and we're going to set these aside. So back to the ingredients for everything in this dish. We'll start with a head of green cabbage, a stalk of celery, an onion. I have a red bell pepper here, a couple eggs. We have our hedgehogs, which we previously cooked with the onions. We have porcini, which is dry. We have tomatoes. I'm using canned diced tomatoes here. We have our brandy. We're using paprika. Here I'm using a smoked paprika we refer to as Hungarian. We have salt. We have rice. We have couscous. We're using butter and ketchup. Now, once you have all these ingredients, we can begin and start assembling these garnamki. Now, first thing I like to do with my cabbage is cut it in half and throw it in the freezer and forget about it. If you can do that overnight, that'd be good. Here we've chopped up the onions, peppers, and celery. And here we're gonna puree it in the food processor. We take our dried porcinis and we add a lot of water. We want to bring this to a boil and reduce for our stock. Here we brown the butter and we throw the couscous in. And we're going to stir the couscous until it's brown. Throw our paprika in. Throw the pureed sofrito in, which is the onions, peppers, and celery. Here we're going to add our rice. And remember the amount of rice that you're throwing in, because the amount of stock we will be using is twice this amount. After the rice is added, we're going to throw some salt in. And here we're going to strain our porcini, and we're going to also add the stock into the rice and couscous mix. Once that comes to a boil, we're going to cover. We're going to take it off the heat, and we're going to set it and forgive it. Here it's about 420, so we want to go for about 40 minutes until we check it again. In the meantime, our cabbage is froze overnight, and we're going to take it out for processing. We do want to let this defrost a little bit before we begin. Here we can see the process of the leaves freezing. They're not crumbly as they were raw, very pliable, so these will be nice to work with once we take it out of the freezer. Here I'm cutting out the core. And then once that's removed, you can just peel the leaves off one by one. Here we're going to separate them and set them up and count them. Now we want to prefer the larger leaves, but it's okay to piece together a lot of small ones. Once you get to the center where they're really small, we're going to set this aside, give it a little bit of a chop, and that's going to be added to the mix. Here we have our cabbage separated. And when our rice is done, we want to put it on a thin platform and cool it in the fridge. Once the rice mixture is cool, we're going to add our cooked hedgehog mushrooms, our porcini, which we've cleaned and diced from the stalk, our chopped cabbage, the rice mixture, the eggs, and also a dash of ketchup. So back to the diced tomatoes, we're going to take the juice and we're going to line the pans and also sprinkle a little salt in. Once that's done, we can roll up our garnamkis. Now here, I kind of match the amount of cups that I have of cabbage with the amount of rice that I have. Once those are in the pan, we'll throw the rest of the diced tomatoes in, and we're going to throw the rest of the excess stock. We're also going to slob on some ketchup before we throw it in the oven. We're going to cover these and cook these in a hot oven for about 40 minutes. Once they're done, you'll notice it'll start to brown on the edges. Here we also want to put more ketchup on top and cover the top evenly. We're going to throw it in the oven and brown it. Once it's brown, it's ready to serve, and we want to serve this hot. Oh, that's it. Easy recipe for the fall with hedgehogs. And from my kitchen to yours, I want to wish you bon appetit.
Wow, that looks amazing, Spike. That looks so delicious.
You look amazing and delicious. Those are really good.
I like the technique of cryo blanching the cabbage. That's smart.
I learned that a long time ago, and I never went back.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. It's actually a great idea.
You can do that with a lot of things that you would normally blanch in water. You just freeze them instead. It's smart.
So my father's a chef, and in our family, we always, tear the leaves off and boil them individually, and it makes your whole house smell like cooked cabbage for like days. So this really
Mhm.
avoids. So just a little tip.
Thank you. Already learned something. There you go.
There's a recipe for lacto fermented porcini in the fermentation book from the guys at NOMA, where they have you cryo blanch like 2 pounds of porcini. And I did that once, and it worked great for cryo blanching the porcini. And problem is, then I let my ferment go too long, and they got moldy. So that was a waste of 2 pounds of porcini. But I learned about cryo blanching from that. So
Oh no, that's a bummer. You lost all those.
yeah, I think I talked to you after, Jess, because I was like, I want to lacto ferment mushrooms again, but I want to do a better job. So I remember asking you, and you
Oh,
recommended cooking them. So
Yeah. Yeah, you could do either way, but cool.
Spike, that looked absolutely delicious.
You look absolutely delicious.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we do have a couple of questions for that video there, Spike.
Okay.
The first one, funny enough, is what kind of ketchup?
It's actually tomato blood. As a matter of fact, I believe it's a Heinz product. Probably around 57, maybe 57 and a half. I forget. But it's listed actually as tomato blood is how they sell it.
Tomato blood. I've never heard of that. The next one we have is can I substitute something for the cabbage? Donna just can't tolerate it.
The mix and everything would go good into peppers. If you wanted to do stuffed peppers, would work very well. Even if you wanted to throw it into I think a bread bowl might be a little starchy with the rice and the couscous, but that's my other option. Even this time of year, we have acorn squash. That would be fantastic, and butternut squash. Half a sugar pumpkin would be nice. There are options. Anything that'll hold the rice mixed together would work just fine.
We got mallow leaves, beet leaves, and grape leaves being recommended in the chat. Do you have any thought on that?
No, I don't have.
I
I
was-
don't have
yeah.
that.
I,
That
They would
I
work.
was about to
but
suggest
definitely work.
dolmas would work great. So grape leaves are right in that. Right in
Yeah.
that lane.
Swiss chard leaves also being recommended. And of course, pasta. Just throw it into pasta, I guess. No, that's a lot of carb. If you put it in pasta.
It is a lot of carb. I suggested the bread bowl because that's something I would do, but I would probably thin it out and have it more like a hedgehog and pasta soup. If I went that route, but that is a lot of carbs. You are correct.
My guess is you could probably sub in quinoa for the couscous as well, and that would up the protein and fiber just a bit, keep the carbs low.
Yeah, that would be great.
Chris said turkey. I guess stuffing a turkey with it.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Which actually brings me to another question that I received from Brennan, which is it's unrelated to your video, but since we're talking about turkeys, I'll bring it up. So Brennan asked that they like to make some compound butter using dried mushrooms to stuff under the skin of a turkey for the upcoming Thanksgiving. Which herbs and spices and whatnot should go inside of that compound butter? And note that they plan to smoke the turkey. Any thoughts from anyone?
My go-to for birds is marjoram, especially for the holiday like Thanksgiving, where it's a big turkey dinner. Has flavor, but it's not too strong.
I use savory.
The other video we were thinking about playing for me tonight was me making a porcini shallot miso compound butter. So I would go with porcini powder, miso, shallots, and then if you want to go herbs, probably sage, thyme, and a little bit of marjoram. Something like that would be great. Also lemon peel. Stack it up.
That's good. Yeah.
Nice.
Always throw in the citrus. What do we got? Is it possible to sub? Is it possible? Sorry, Don, I'm not really. Is it possible to sub with other app hedgehog other than hedgehog? I assume.
Oh yeah. Any mushroom would really work. I just happened to find hedgehogs that day, so that's how they ended up by the end of the night.
Spike, do you have a favorite dish to cook specifically with
It's a-
hedgehogs?
No, not necessarily. It's cooking so variant, depends on the weather, the time of year, what's available. Sometimes I go to the grocery store and they might be out of something, and it's the recipe never really comes together until it hits the plate. There's even that recipe in the video, there was a lot of things that I was going to do different, and they just kind of change. It evolves. So no real favorite. I just let the mushrooms take me where they want to go. It's into my
Wait.
stomach.
Hedgehogs tend to be very dense and meaty, kind of like a chanterelle, but I find their flavor to be, if anything, even a little bit sweeter and nuttier and more intense than a chanterelle in some ways. So they're an excellent mushroom just to cook up and eat straight up on their own. But if you need a mushroom that can really hold up to some cooking and hold up to stuff, a hedgehog is a really good one. So
I think they're great, especially the small ones. Working
Yeah.
with them, if you can cook them and dry them, they complement nuts and sweet things and dried fruits and things. Perfect outlet for desserts. We don't have a lot of mushroom desserts. Just to throw that out there with those, like you mentioned, they have this kind of sweet nuttiness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica was asking, well, she said, I found hedgehogs in the summer here in Wisconsin. Where was Spike finding them? What time of year was it?
This was like last week. Autumn. I'm in Rhode Island though. We have a very strange habitat. I watch it every year, when it comes up the coast, and then in the beginning of the season, it crawls up the coast, and then it doesn't hit Rhode Island, and it has to do with the mountains, I believe, and it'll go up north into like Vermont, New Hampshire, into Maine, and then it'll loop down for southern New England here, eastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island and eastern Connecticut. I would throw in there. So we're about 2 weeks after even New Hampshire and Vermont, and those finding things west of us. And it goes in reverse towards the tail end of the year. So we do kind of luck out. So we get an extra 2 weeks versus everybody else.
Just a little side note to folks writing in the chat that there are quite a few people who are writing in their comments specifically to the hosts and panelists and not to everyone. Even though I assume that some of these are for everyone. So just note that in the chat when you go, and it says to, and then it'll either say hosts and panelists, or you can choose for everyone. So please feel free to use everyone unless you specifically want to write us. Just a little note.
I was just back in Massachusetts, and I was hoping to find more hedgehogs, but it had been sort of on-off rain, but not consistent rain. And hedgehogs and chanterelles both like somewhat consistent rain to kind of grow. But I did find one that was about the size of a dinner plate, and that was pretty cool.
Wow. Nice.
But only one.
It's a tease.
Have any idea whether the mucilaginous factors of some fungus like honey mushrooms can be used as a replacement for okra's goop factor in gumbo?
Swillis. Use Swillis.
We have Poliota squarosoides is one of the mushrooms is that even when I work with it in the kitchen is you got to treat it like okra, and after it cooks it still has this kind of slime all over it. But I haven't played around too much with that gluten factor. Even a lot of pellicles that you can peel off of, russulas and cortinarias and things like that. I haven't gotten there just yet. But did want to mention that one in particular, that those foliotas that we have up here, and they're so abundant too. And they just have that, you mentioned okra and mushroom. That's where my head went. I'm done.
You can get namacos at an Asian store. That's another Foliota adiposa species that is very, very goopy.
Yeah, that's what Olga's saying too. Namaco can be cultivated on logs there. Well,
Nice.
are there any other questions for Spike on this video, or anything come to mind before we jump into our next video by Gordon? 3, 2, 1. All right. So the next kind of roll is slightly different. I think you'll know almost immediately what kind it is, so I'm not going to spoil the surprise. For those who need a link to it, I'll post it right now. And I'll share my screen now.
Hey Fungi friends, I've got a friend coming over tonight who's vegan, and I figured I would make some lobster mushroom rolls that are vegan. So I've got these beautiful big lobster mushrooms that I picked up in Humboldt last weekend. They are super fresh, super crispy, delicious. They don't really taste like lobster, but I'm gonna kind of use some things and show you my tricks to make it taste a little bit more like seafood. It has a really good, solid texture. You can hear that from these big taps. This is an absolutely massive one, but I cooked up some of my other ones down here, and I'll show you guys kind of what this looks like and how this is all going to come together. This is going to be pretty quick because I've already kind of cooked the mushrooms and I cooled them down because I didn't want hot mushrooms melting all my mayonnaise. And I'm going to make it vegan by using like a vegan mayo. You could clearly do this, you know, non-vegan, but I got a vegan friend here, so we're gonna do it so she can eat it. And I'm gonna kind of play around with a few extra flavor components here to bump up that seafood flavor. But the first thing I think I'm going to do is just bisect these rolls. Do this carefully so I don't cut myself on live. That would be embarrassing. So I'm going to cut them in half, and I'm using kind of bigger rolls because this is dinner. I wanted a slightly more substantial roll, so I'm going to cut these. Just toast them for a second, and I'll show you guys how I'm going to bring together this sort of quote-unquote lobster filling. And you know, people talk a lot about lobster mushrooms and them tasting like lobster. I think that's mostly sort of a made-up thing. They don't really taste like seafood, and if they do, they can occasionally smell a little fishy. But if they smell fishy, that's just a sign that your lobster mushrooms are too old. You know, if you're picking lobster mushrooms that smell really fishy, they are too old. You probably should not pick those. But they do cook up real nice like, you know, pretty meaty texture. They're very, very solid, almost crispy. And I'm gonna go ahead and just chop up a couple of tomatoes. I have some finely diced shallot here, so I'm gonna add the shallot into my mushroom. I'm gonna add probably a couple of really big, generous scoops of vegan mayo. Vegan mayo is great because it's basically just mayo. The only, you know, it doesn't have eggs in it, but they use soy lecithin, which is just a protein that acts as an emulsifier. And you know, as with any good sort of mayonnaise-based salad, more mayonnaise is always better. it's just going to taste better that way. Fat is flavor, and the mayonnaise is how we're dispersing that flavor all around here, turning this into something really, really good and tasty. Okay, so we got a nice mayonnaise mixture there. I'm gonna add some fresh cherry tomatoes for a little bit of umami and zing. Open up a beer. Cheers, too. Man, I flew back from Alaska this morning. It was like a red-eye flight. I am beat. I took a long nap, but I am still not recovered from flying all night. It was quite the ordeal, but it was very much worth going to the wedding, and it was really fun to be in Alaska and check out some of that habitat. So I'm just chopping up a little bit of shiso and basil here. I'm going to put that in. Classic for lobster rolls is tarragon, but I don't have any tarragon, and I have lots of shiso and basil, so I'm going to put that in. I don't want to overwhelm it with herb flavor, so I'm only putting in a little bit. And I really want to let these kind of lobster mushrooms shine through, so I'm trying to not put too much other stuff in. But I'll show you guys, I do have a few kind of secret ingredients here. They're not secret, I'm going to tell you what they are, but I have a few special ingredients where I'm going to try to help the lobster mushroom taste a little bit more like seafood. Because inherently it doesn't taste that much like seafood, and I want to make this, you know, have a real kind of essence of the ocean type thing, so it'll conjure that lobster roll feeling, I guess, you know? I mean, the other thing that I'm not doing is I'm not coating everything in butter, which is another hallmark of good lobster rolls back on the East Coast, but, you know, I wish I had some vegan butter. Then I would, you know, smother my buns in vegan butter. But, you know, if you guys do this at home, you can do that, so. Okay, grab grab something to clean up my board here real quick. Sure. Okay. So, just trying to keep everything nice and tidy, doing our mise en place here. Okay. So here's tomatoes, here's my big ass lobster mushroom. Okay, so I have some wakame seaweed, and I rehydrated this. This is, most often Americans will see this in like miso soup. This is kind of wakame you see in miso soup. So I rehydrated my wakame, and I put the liquid from the wakame into the lobster mushrooms as they were cooking and reduced it down. So that gave them sort of a nice salty seaweed character. And I'm going to put some wakame in. Again, I don't want to like overwhelm the lobster mushrooms, so I'm just putting a little bit in for some extra texture. And I'm going to kind of see how this looks. I think ultimately more mayonnaise is always a good idea. So I'm going to put a little more mayonnaise here. You're not going to be shy. We're eating vegan, right? That's healthy. I get more mayonnaise. So here goes my lobster mushroom with my wakame and my herbs and some tomatoes. Making a really nice filling here. Okay, great. And then I want to add a little bit of extra seafood flavor and texture too. So I'm going to go with some sesame seeds. Just sprinkle these on because they'll add some nice texture and a little extra nutritional boost from sesame seeds. Really good for you. And I've got some furikake. So this is basically sesame seaweed seasoning, rice seasoning, but it's got some seaweed flakes in it. So I'm going to, again, just using seaweed to recapitulate that flavor of the ocean. And the other thing I've got is just a little bit of a lacto hot sauce that I made. And this stuff's pretty spicy, so I'm going to just put a very small little dollop of that in. And hopefully that'll make things interesting as we go here. So boom, there's our filling. And I'll show you guys how this comes together here in just a second. Grab one of my loaves out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the loaf. I'm going to put in a big piece of shiso in it, and then I'm going to put my topping on top of that, and then I have one more extra finished thing to show you guys. Ooh, that's hot. Okay, let's take this out. Ooh, that's a warm little roll. Ooh, it's hot. That's what you get for live cooking. Be patient. Have a sip of beer. Don't burn yourself. Oh yeah. So I mean, you could do this approach with literally any mushroom. I'm using the lobster mushroom because it kind of plays up that whole lobster roll thing. But you could very easily do this with, agaricus bisporus you buy at the store. It's like making a chicken salad or something like that. You cook some protein, you cover it in mayonnaise, put some herbs and spices, maybe a couple of the little veg things in there, smack it in a roll. It's gonna be good. It's hard to go wrong with this kind of thing, guys. So I got my nice pillowy bread here. Oh yes. And I'm going to spoon in some of my lobster roll mixture. A couple of nice big spoonfuls. I'm cooking for 2 others tonight, so I'm not going to use this all. But get a nice healthy dose of this. So I've got my tomatoes and my lobster mushrooms and my wakame and my herbs. All this really good stuff. And then our house guest who's been staying here got some truffle chips. So just to be extra, I'm going to take a couple of her truffle chips and crumble these on top for a little extra texture. So this is kind of, potato chips and lobster rolls are a very classic combination. And I figured playing up the mushroom thing by adding the truffle chips might be kind of fun. So boom, there you have it. Here's a vegan lobster roll full of lots of good mushrooms and other good things. I'll take a big bite for you. Oh god, that was so killer. The mushroom has really good texture. The herb flavors coming through. Got a nice hint of seaweed and that seafood flavor. So it really does kind of taste like a lobster roll. But here we go. Big old lobster mushroom vegan lobster rolls. Really cool. So I'm excited to cook this big one. I've been holding off on doing something with this, but you'll see this cooked in the next day or two. Yeah, it's really good. Wow. I I'm gonna eat this entire thing right now. But I'll wait. I'll wait until my dinner guests come back. So, killer dish, super easy. Comes together in a couple minutes. You guys can do it too. Sorry, I should have finished chewing before I got to talking. If you want to learn more from me, as always, check out my website, fascinatingbyfungi.com. I've got cool original t-shirt designs. I have an About Me page. I have an FAQ page where I answer all your questions about what resources, what websites do I use. I've got a mushroom discount page. You can save money on mushroom kits and a knife you see me using, coffee, supplements, all sorts of stuff, so check that out. Please follow me on YouTube. Check me out on Twitter and Pinterest and every social media platform I can think of, I am on. But as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to me, and send you guys much love and hopefully many tasty mushroom dishes in the future. Bye!
Oh, that looked tasty, Gordon. So tasty. It must be dinner time over here on the West Coast.
You hungry?
Yep, I am starving right now.
Yep, getting there. So a couple people asked, I saw a question about how I cook the mushrooms. So in that one, I just cut the lobster mushrooms into about 1/4-inch cubes and did a hard, dry sear in a cast iron pan. And I like to do that with all wild mushrooms, but lobster mushrooms in particular really benefit from getting some like hot, direct heat before you put any oil or butter in the pan. So I probably seared them off, cooked off all the water in about 5 minutes, and then I added a little bit of neutral oil, browned them up. And like I said, took the liquid from the wakame and added that to reduce down and try to get a little of that seaweed flavor into the mushroom. And then someone else was asking about shiso. Shiso's a Japanese mint. It's sort of like a spicy mint. They use a lot in Korean barbecue and stuff like that. It's just, I grow it in the backyard, so I have it around.
I wanted to mention that I enjoyed you slapping the mushroom repeatedly, really giving off the texture of what you were working with. That thing was a giant, by the
That was
way.
giant.
That's definitely the biggest lobster I've ever found. And yeah, I get a lot of flack online for tapping mushrooms too much, but I think it's a really cool way to test the texture and density. And it does demonstrate very quickly, you know, what's going on inside that mushroom by tapping it.
Oh, absolutely.
Completely agree. Out of curiosity, your giant lobster there, was it buggy at all, or was it just a pristine giant lobster?
No, that one was pristine. And I kept it in the fridge for about a week and a half before I finally got around to cooking it. And I was sort of afraid that I was going to cut into it and it's going to be a bug city, but no, it was perfect. That was the best lobster I've ever gotten.
Going through all the chat here, I do have one. Well, actually, what method was used to cook the lobster? I suppose you just answered that. So,
well, there's other ways to cook lobster, but I think a hard pan sear until they're almost dehydrated is kind of my favorite way to do them, because lobster, the base species, is a russula, and everything in russulas and lactarius have these spheroid cells, so they have a tendency to be a little grainy in the mouth when you eat them. And so I like doing a really hard sear on them, or even a roast. You cut them a little bit thin and roast them at like 400 for 20-25 minutes, and that really helps firm up the texture and make it much more meaty and toothy instead of having it be kind of like weird and grainy. So I highly recommend that with any russula or lactarius.
Nice.
are there any particular recommendations you've got for preparing black trumpets? I decided to hit the jackpot with my boys in the field. I've dried our hull. We do have a video of black trumpets, but
I use I run a kitchen in Providence, Rhode Island, and I use those in a lot of dishes. Just to let you know, it's highlighting them for their flavor can be one thing, but adding them to everything else, even if they're hidden a little bit, just makes everything taste that much better. So have fun drying all those, and make some compounds with them that you can freeze. I mean, they're such a nice, flavorful mushroom, and if you hit the jackpot, you can cook with them, all winter long, which is really nice.
One of the things that I really like to do with black trumpets is I make a really nice fermented nut cheese and I add black trumpets to it. And that one has always been a winner at my events. And just kind of playing off that sort of cheesiness that the black trumpets naturally have anyways. And then you have like the fermented the nuts in there as well. It kind of amplifies that, and it's pretty tasty. Or even like smoking it can be adding even another layer to that. But that's been what I usually do with black trumpets. So
I love that. I've done the same thing, sort of similar, mixing it into ricotta for pasta fillings or putting it on pizzas with cheese. But last year I also made a black trumpet chili oil because I was looking for something else that had that umami punch. So I took all the shake and the little pieces at the bottom of a black trumpet bag and made chili oil with those as well. So they had a really good kick to that.
Ooh. Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like I also got someone went to Missouri Falls on a foray and they had candied black trumpets, which were awesome. So many things you can do with it. I had just the other day, I quickly needed to make a meal, had a ton of black trumpets that I had found. So I literally just threw them together with some, I think it was a portobello tomato sauce that I had, and just loaded it with black trumpets, and then put it with like fettuccine, and it was amazing, absolutely amazing. A lot of umami flavor came through. So I think it's pretty
Does
versatile.
anyone fellow chefs have recommendations on how to clean trumpets, because they can be tricky? I know how I do it, but I want to hear what you guys.
Clean them in the fields.
Yeah, but what about the inside?
I just split them apart. Yeah.
Well, look at them. If they don't look good or they're dirty, just skip over them. I mean, there's usually millions of those things on the ground.
Yeah.
If you only find a handful of them, just rinse them underwater in a strainer. You're good.
There you go. Yeah, I split them and soak them usually. Especially here on the West Coast, we get bigger black trumpets, but man, they are full of stuff. So you got to like take your finger and scrape it out.
Yeah, full of fir needles.
We have a lot of... Go on, Jess.
Oh, it's okay. I was just mentioning, like fir needles. It's just, they're usually all these fir needles in there that, yeah. Go ahead.
I forgot there's a lot of West Coast people on here. Our trumpets over here on the East Coast in New England are they're nice and clean. They're smaller, but they pack a punch, which is nice, but they're clean. Maybe I didn't take into consideration that other parts of the country have dirty trumpets.
Oh, dirty trumpets over here.
Yeah, ours aren't too bad. I agree with Spike. But I still do these slice in lengthwise or vertically, and then I just do it kind of like I would with salad. I rinse them for a little while, soak them for a bit, and then put them in a salad spinner, and just get rid of as much of the water as possible before doing anything with them. So we have a question. May there ever be a time when you would question eating a lobster? I've heard, depending on the host, that might not sit well with some people. There is a question over here on lobster mushrooms possibly parasitizing some mushrooms that wouldn't sit well with us. And
so this is a big concern that a lot of people have, and I've heard it echoed over and over and over again. I found several things that say within, in the last 100 years of people eating lobster mushrooms, there hasn't been a single reported case of anyone getting sick from a lobster mushroom, which is crazy because most edible mushrooms cause people to get sick all the time, even, portobellos and morels and, normal things that we eat. Shiitakes make people sick all the time. So I think as long as it's a lobster mushroom, you're safe. If you start getting into eating some of the other weird Hypomyces species, you might want to revise exactly what you're eating. But I think as long as it's a lobster mushroom, you're good to go. Just cook it well.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I don't, I tell the people the same thing. I always let people know that, the concern that exists there. But yeah, I think that in my experience or my deducing of this logic is once you actually notice that it is a lobster mushroom, it's already on the safe side. I feel like if there was reported incidences earlier, like you said, it hasn't been recently, and then it could have been literally anything or misinformation or something like that. But it seems to be lobster mushrooms are pretty safe.
And I agree with that. Well, there's data going back centuries on this stuff. You need to make your own informed decision when you eat things. You may hear different news, whether it's true or false, or just in the wind passing. Everybody's going to be individual on making those decisions on and how they want to use those. We mentioned the other weird Hypomyces. I enjoy Hypomyces hyalinus, but I've never seen that outside of Section Validate. And everything in Section Validate is safe to cook. And those are fantastic. But early on, when I really wanted to know what species that was infecting, I did take a look around, and if it wasn't obvious, I would leave it.
Couple things here. So another recommendation for black trumpets was in eggs, which I think would be also really delicious. There was one question here on dehydrated lobster mushrooms, and the name is hidden from me here. Donna, there we go. Was asking whether she should rehydrate them and then roast them as suggested.
The lobsters, the texture doesn't come back super well once they've been dried. So I don't know if I'd recommend roasting, but I'm pretty sure Jess did something about like dehydrating them, then lacto fermenting them. Jess, do you remember that?
Actually, I did a sous vide of them. And no, wait, no, you're right. It's been many years ago though. I did ferment them. You're right. You have a better memory than I do of what I've done. Yeah, the texture on those, it definitely softened them up more like they were when they were fresh, but I did not use them dehydrated initially. So yeah, I have not had any luck really getting lobsters to taste. The texture is just gone, like you said. After after you dehydrate them and try to rehydrate and get that same thing going again, I would rather either powder them at that point or getting maybe powdering them or using them as a stock, extracting the flavors for a stock or something like that. But
it's fine to rehydrate them and then toss them into like a risotto or something where the texture isn't as important. They're sort of just a nice chewy little piece of mushroom, but it's never going to have that same crunch. I wouldn't make a lobster roll with them, for example, once they've been dehydrated.
I know I had a soup in Oaxaca, rural Oaxaca, at a little restaurant, and it was a soup with rehydrated lobster mushrooms, and that was like the whole bowl of soup was lobster mushrooms rehydrated, and it was. First couple bites were okay, but that was a lot to chew through. That was probably one of the least favorite times I've had lobster mushrooms, but yeah, rehydrated, not so great.
So yeah, a stick blender goes a long way if you're going to make soup.
Yeah, definitely.
There was a suggestion here that dehydrated lobster seemingly does well, according to Darren, when it's powdered and used to coat fish when you're going to be pan frying them. So
yeah, definitely powdering. Mm-hmm.
There's also a question about whether you can use koji to ferment the mushrooms. From Julie.
That would be interesting. That would be a fun experiment to try. I have not tried koji yet, and I'm tempted, but I think Gordon, you've done some koji, right?
A tiny bit. I've seen Elena work with it more from Shared Cultures because they regularly do mushroom misos. So they mix mushrooms with their legume grain base and then mix in the koji rice granules and then let it, ferment for 3 to 6 months or whatever. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that could be interesting to break down that tough texture.
Yeah. You could certainly take some like a shio koji mixture and rub that on slices of mushroom and let them sit in the fridge overnight and then try searing them off the next day to see if that would improve like the crust you get on them.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. We got a question if anyone has an experience with green lobster mushrooms.
I was gonna ask that question myself. So I remember the first time I found that. I've heard that people really like these things, that they're better than the Hypomyces lactiflorum that's on the Rusula there. And I just remember tasting it, it was off-putting, smelling it, it was off-putting, and that's my experience with the green lobster. But I did want to ask everybody watching and the panelists what their experiences are, because I keep on hearing good things about it.
I have not tried it. I've not even found a green lobster yet. So
I believe it's Hypomyces luteovirens is the species, and it also parasitizes.
Right. I wasn't even going to try to pronounce that, but go on.
Okay, you got it.
I think it parasitizes wrestlers. I've seen it on the East Coast, and I didn't eat it there, but I saw it at Telluride this year and did eat it, but it was part of a big mushroom medley, so I didn't get a chance to kind of evaluate on its own. But I've heard from a lot of people, too, that it is as good, if not better, than a normal lobster mushroom. So,
yeah.
As Spike said, it's your risk to take, but there hasn't been any reported cases of poisoning. The one kind of Hypomyces you really wanted to be careful for is the bolete eater, the Chrysospermus, the one that grows on boletes, because that turns it moldy and yellow and really bitter. And then also the white fluffy Hypomyces that grow in morels is also toxic. So if you have a white Hypomyces, avoid it. I believe pretty much all the other colored Hypomyces are edible to some degree or another. Although I didn't know you could actually eat Hyalina. So I learned something from you, Spike.
I think that's really recently I found that Mycogone rosea on Amanita chrysoblema, because we're in chrysoblema season right now, and that was fascinating because I've never seen a Hypomyces outside of Valaday, so that was a first for me, and I was excited when I saw it because there's papers 2010, I forget the mycologist's name, but goes over all these Hypomyces, and there was one on Muscaria in Idaho, I think, but I never believed it because I never come across it. Even the Hypomyces hyalinus, we have a great habitat here in Rhode Island for Amanita, and that attacks the blushers. We have a lot of blushers, but it also goes a lot of the Ceres mapae, the ones that smell like potatoes, and the starfoots I've seen it on. I haven't cooked those to eat. I've eaten them uninfected, but the blusher ones, they're really fantastic, especially the really big girthy ones. I like to slice them up like scallops and treat them like diver scallops, and they sear up really nice. They're a great substitute, and they have some flavor to them. That's more powerful than just the regular blushers.
Interesting.
Yeah, fun with Amanita.
Yeah.
Apparently one of our attendees here, Donna, has one of our green lobsters dried and whole, waiting for some sort of preparation. Figure I'd throw that out there. Do have a question on, well, before we get to the question about someone was interested in your, well, maybe we just actually kind of answer that. I'll move on. Preparing cauliflower mushrooms. Any tips?
Find clean ones. That seems to be the thread of today that people are asking me. If the really dirty ones, sometimes you pick, unless you're starving. I mean, just remember, everything that you pack up in the woods, you got to carry out, you got to take it home, you got to clean it. The best thing to do with all those edible mushrooms is clean it in the field. Do most of the work out there, so you're not bringing that dirt in the kitchen. But even a lot of those twigs. Salamanders and bugs, they're easy. They can just rinse right out. You know, it's a really firm mushroom. But even the ones that look good, but maybe a lot of stuff fell in them, and they have that haptomorphosis, and they grow right through them, and it's stuck in the flesh. Just skip over them. You know, find something that had a little shade. You know, it wasn't getting rained on with needles and twigs and things. That's my suggestion.
I unfortunately haven't had the opportunity to really experiment too much with cauliflower. That's one that I believe I've found only twice, and I've just did a basic preparation just to get a flavor profile on it and see how it tastes. Amazing, of course, but yeah, I hear people's preparing it like as a pasta, adding a marinara to it, and or whatever favorite pasta sauce, but or like an egg noodle dish, and but yeah, that's one I would love to play with a bit more. What about you, Gordon?
Yeah, Sparasis is a top tier edible mushroom. It's definitely one of my favorites. Similar to other sort of big polypore-like mushrooms, you can either kind of break it apart into chunks and then wash it off like that, or you can try to cut kind of big steaks out of it and then try to clean it that way. The big steaks are great for searing or battering and frying. Once you break up chunks, you get kind of as Jess said, that pasta noodle-like substitute, because it really does look like egg noodles, except it has more of the sort of cartilaginous, crunchy texture. So that's great in cold salads. I think the preparation I've done with it pretty much every time I found a big cauliflower was do Chef Chet Hyatt's version of carbonara with it, because you don't really need the starch necessarily from pasta. You can just get away with making an egg and cheese and water mixture and pouring that over your cooked noodles, and as long as there's some pancetta and a little bit of garlic and rosemary in there, it tastes really, really, really good. So Parasis is awesome.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful and tasty mushroom. I wanted to add that I treat mine like cabbage. Going back to cleaning methods, even when you do bring it back home, as you would rinse off or peel away cabbage, you can kind of, remove sediment and things that way. And as a cabbage substitute, whatever I would cook cabbage, I would use Sparasis as well. Might be the Pollock in me, but I don't know.
There was a clarification or clarification question, I suppose, for you, Spike, which is you said something about section validate always being edible, and whether that is truly what you said.
Edible. Everything in section validate is edible after being cooked. Should be on the record. That's the statement.
I believe section Caesarea and Vaginate are also all edible Amanita sections, and Caesarea can be cooked or can be eaten raw. But yeah, you definitely want to cook blushers, because those have hemolytic proteins that are toxic to red blood cells in them if they're raw.
And there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of different compounds and toxins found through many mushrooms. Not even just Amanita, but even with Amanita, they're so complex. But there's a lot of papers, with research that they've done on the toxicities and things. And in my experiences, a lot of this is subjective. Going back to those hemotoxins, that they're destabilized by heat. The threshold that they have is our stomach. The temperature on our stomach is higher than that point. So, read these studies on toxicity. I don't want to say with a grain of salt, because these are legit studies, but use it as information before to make informed decisions. The theme on that.
Yeah. Did have a little suggestion here that suggestion/question regarding smoking the mushrooms prior to using them in carbonara and skipping over the pancetta or bacon or lardon or whatever it is that you might use for a carbonara.
You could definitely do that, but carbonara is built on pork fat and eggs and cheese. So if you want to start making a vegan carbonara, you're making a different kind of dish.
Seriously. But you could still have a vegetarian.
Yeah, definitely.
Another question was for all of us, I suppose. You recommend wild mushrooms in an iron skillet? I did it today, so yes, I'm good with that.
All I have is an iron cast iron.
I almost exclusively only use it.
Wait, so Jess and I both know this, but there's some rumeria that when you cook them in iron, they turn kind of a weird, dingy purple color. So most mushrooms syrup great in cast iron, but there's a few that take on a weird color from the iron.
Yeah.
That goes on with the chemical reagents. The iron salts are very useful with rumeria identification. So that actually makes a lot of sense matching those two together.
Yeah, that's a great information there.
I use a lot of stainless steel in my house. That's my go-to. I don't have well ventilation, and I got an electric stove at home, which is great. It's an LG. It works too good. But that's my favorites are actually stainless steel. You know, that's why I cook a lot of my mushrooms in. I'm not opposed to cooking them in anything, but that's not a highlight that really crosses my mind. You know, depending on what mushrooms getting thrown in that day.
Yeah, usually the type of pan I choose to cook mushrooms has more to do with what else I'm cooking them with than it does the mushroom itself, because I use stainless, nonstick, and cast iron interchangeably.
Well, so Spike, are you doing any dry sautéing then in the stainless steel or not?
It depends on the mushroom. Usually I like just a little splash of oil. Last one that I went really light and on the dry side was this Bushwaldo lignicola, which is I guess it actually hosts on Phallus schwinitzi, the dyer's polypore. But I found a big flush at the end of my street. It was underneath some white pine, and did my research, figured out what it was, and it was actually a first find for me. So usually when I'm trying mushrooms, I do a lot of dry saute because I want to taste the mushroom for what it is. Little splash of salt, just a little hint of unbiased oil, but it's not really saturating. But actually like a straight dry metal heat. No, not that much. Maybe if my batch that day was raining, you know, I might want to get a little water off first. That might be the only reason.
Okay, cool. Always interesting to hear how everybody does theirs. Yeah, with the cast iron, I'm usually just dry sauteing most of my wild mushrooms for sure. You know.
Yeah, I think the only time I really don't use a iron skillet is when I'm working with eggs, and even then, basically like an omelet or crepes. I think it's basically the only time when I go nonstick, and I'm just like, I'm not dealing with that. But otherwise. Just a little note on from Donna here on she collected a lot of Suillus brevips and after peeling the cap, dry frying them, found them to have the texture more rubbery than gooey.
What was the name? What name did you say? I missed that.
She said Suillus
brevips.
Yeah.
Say that one more time, a little slower. I'm sorry, I'm deaf.
Slippery jacks.
Oh, the slippery jack.
Slippery jacks, yeah. So those can be phenomenal, but they definitely, there's a fair bit of like skill that can go into making them taste good. Because Suillus have a very distinctive kind of just, I don't, lack of a better word,
Gross,
overpowering, not just weirdness. I don't know. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? The Suillus taste.
Flavor of slime, it really is.
I know what you're talking about. I just don't even pick them anymore.
What species did they say that they're all a little different? Spraggy eye, the painted one.
No, they said brevipeas. Spraggii is good. It's probably one of the best ones that grows on the East Coast.
No, I like that. That's one of the Vale ones. Oh, the short stalk one is the one you're talking about. Yeah,
Yes.
that's right up there with the yellow one and the granulated one. Those are kind of as you mentioned, even the Sprag ones and a lot of the bigger veiled ones I would go after. You know, those ones in huge flushes under pines this time of year. It's yeah, like Robert said, I kind of skip over those. But even that texture and the flavor, when I do collect those, if they are nice and fresh, I usually dry them. I dry them for the wintertime, and they actually reconstitute great.
I mean, for me, I think the issue mostly is coming down to the cleaning. I just don't want to. Usually, whenever I find them, they're over my cottage. They come in massive amounts, and they're just covered in pine needles and everything else. And I'm just not going to bother myself with that. So
If you don't want to deal with cleaning them, what I'll do sometimes is just soak them and kind of immerse them way you like a black trumpet, and then just put them in a pan totally wet and cook it down for a while, and they'll get all goopy and slimy and weird, but just keep going, push through, give them like cook off all that liquid, all that slime, then hit it with some butter and and some garlic and a little bit of wine, and do a step where you're then deglazing, and just keep in a pan for like 45-50 minutes on sort of a medium low, and you can make something that's really tasty. It's going to take time to cook off that slime, and you want to add some other stuff to kind of help spread out the Swillis flavor a little bit.
The Willis flavor. I like how you say that. No, some of them are great. Some of them are great. They are.
any suggestions for Ganodermates?
No. Honestly, a lot of those Ganodermas with the flavor, there's stronger flavored mushrooms. I find with that. But counteracting the bitterness, I usually throw a couple tea bags in of some green or even Earl Grey. That's a favorite of mine, just to add a little more flavor to the tea and kind of balance it. Among other things, orange zest is very nice. Maybe a little bit of star anise, a little star throw in there as well. And I tend with the more medicinal mushrooms, making teas to drink, I tend to bring them to a boil and simmer them. Try not to disturb it too much with the boils and the high temperature.
Yeah. I like to do like a chai, usually. Like you said, that all those spices in there helps to balance the flavors a little bit, give you even more medicinal compounds in there as well. And it makes it even tastier because, just straight up Ganoderma tea isn't always, too tasty, but or just grinding them down into a powder. And that is also something else you can do and add, make a hot chocolate or, any of those fancy coffees or whatever. But that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I echo what Jess said there. I usually go some sort of chai-esque kind of thing. And if it comes to something like Ganoderma, the biggest benefits you get from Ganoderma are in the polysaccharides themselves, and those don't extract well into water. So if you want the real medicinal benefit of Ganoderma, you'll probably get more out of it by in theory, what you should do, and this is in Chris Hobbs' books, but you put it in like a pressure cooker and cook it down for a while, and then leave the lid on overnight until everything recondenses into the pot, and then throw that all in a blender, whiz it up into a sludge, and then dry that out, then powder it, then take pills of that, and you can have a little Ganoderma pill along with your normal tasty tea that just tastes like whatever good tea you want, and you can get all the medicinal benefits from the little pill that you made.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely have to process it with heat, break down all that chitin and release the polysaccharides, and get all that medicinal benefit. Because when you're making a tea and you're straining out all of the solid compounds, you're losing, some of the good stuff too. So, that whole extract there you were talking about, Gordon, definitely a good way to do it.
Oh, you can finish.
No, go ahead.
I have a question for Gordon, since he knows more of the science and the medicinal aspects. So the only Ganoderma that I picked is the hemlock one, Ganoderma tsuge. But what I really like about those is in the spring we get this what I call the marshmallow stage, and they're the only Ganoderm that I find is really tasty and not super bitter for eating them. So my question has to do with these polysaccharides and things for the medicinal aspect, veering away from brewing, the big shelves into tea, but actually eating these young ones is my question. Would cooking them, I treat them like puffballs myself, and they're really tasty and meaty. Cooking them just in a little heat, just to cook them as a mushroom is am I still getting the medicinal aspect of it would be my question.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting all of it. There's no extraction. You're just getting the whole thing. But yeah, go ahead, Gordon.
Well, I was gonna say, same as what you just said, Jess. Yeah, definitely eating it is the best way to get it. The thing I'm not sure of is when you have those little nascent marshmallow nubs, and I've eaten those before on the East Coast. They are very good. There's a sustainability thing you want to be careful of because you don't want to like cut all of new growing Ganoderma. Only if you see tons of them would you take a couple. And then in terms of cooking it, the heat is going to just make the stuff that's in there more bioavailable, so more able for our bodies to absorb it. But I'm not sure that those young ones will have gotten quite as many of the bioactive compounds developed in those young fruiting bodies. So no, I don't think anyone's done that chemical analysis on like old versus young fruiting bodies.
I was just curious. You sounded very, very versed on the subject. I just like eating them because they're tasty, but if it's medicine as well, yay.
Yeah, I mean, go for it. I mean, I'd say that most mushrooms are medicinal. Like pretty much every mushroom has polysaccharides in it that benefit our immune system and can help diversify your gut microbiome. So all mushrooms in that sense are good for you because they're full of fiber. And people usually say that they have no nutritional benefit, but they have good protein, they have micronutrients, they have vitamins and vitamin D, and importantly, the fiber is the most nutritious thing about them.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%, Gordon. I have a master's in herbal medicine and you are spot on. I agree with all those things you're saying. Eat your mushrooms. Mushrooms are magical and medicinal.
Mushrooms are magic.
All mushrooms are magic.
All
Just
All of
some
them.
are active. All of them are magic, but only some of them are active.
There was a
You can
subsequent
even-
question
Cook and eat those active mushrooms. Sorry, go ahead.
on whether drying and powdering the Ganoderma might be a more effective way to save effort. My experience with that is it's very difficult to powder a dry Ganoderma. They're pretty tough, but anyone else their experience?
As long as you're getting a heat, you're heating that powder somehow, not just putting that in a smoothie or something. As long as you're heating that, so you can even, make, like Gordon said, make those polysaccharides bioavailable. You need to heat those up. I see a lot of packages on the shelf of powdered mushroom supplements that are raw and like unprocessed. Like that's not really doing you a whole lot of good. You need to heat that up, put it in something hot or simmer that powder for a while. And then you have something really bioavailable your body can actually use. And you're not just, sending it on through without actually making use of it.
I'd say generally
I
speaking.
totally agree. Trying to grind those things up, that's a task in itself. I use a chainsaw just to slice them up sometimes. I mean, these things, I don't want to ruin my knives on those things, but
Right.
some of them are pretty woody.
Mhm.
How much heat?
Good question. As long as I would bring it up to a boil and let it simmer, at least 15 to 20 minutes is kind of my baseline processing for mushrooms, along with other woody herbs like roots and barks and stuff like that, known as a decoction in herbal medicine. And really, longer the better. The longer you can simmer that, you're going to be extracting even more. I see Rebecca over here asked where I got my master's in herbal medicine. That is from the American College of Healthcare Sciences in Portland. So I did that as well as a holistic nutrition degree as well.
There's also about the resinous polypore here. Anyone has any experience using that in broth or in any other ways?
Oh God, that is one of the like best mushrooms I've tried in terms of like the meaty texture. It is spot on with like beef or pork.
It's like steak. It really is.
Really?
Really?
Okay,
Really?
I have not tried this one. That sounds interesting.
Y'all gotta
Even-
come
even-
to New England sometime. It's season right now too. Those things are everywhere.
They are everywhere. Now I know I need to go back and collect them.
Okay,
They
all
also
right.
have the prettiest
Yeah.
gutations.
Even-
I geek out on that so hard.
So what's a
Even-
recipe that you would do with that? Give us an
I
example.
mean, I'm a recently turned pescatarian for about 2 months now. So my goal has been finding my protein and meat substitutes that I could do. So that's a great one. What you're looking at broth with a lot of mushrooms, Maripilus is my favorite for the broth. They give that real beefy kind of tone to it. But these things are those resinous polypores. They got some nice flavor to them, and they make a really nice broth. Which, especially now that it's getting cold, this is the time for stews and soups. So
Yeah, definitely.
Pretty interesting. All right. We got a question for you, Spike, on whether you use the chainsaw in your kitchen.
no, that's an outside tool. Like and going back a few times, do your cleaning and work outside. Do it in the fields. Take the minimal amount of work inside. You're always gonna have to do some things inside, but do most of it outside. That way you just leave it. It's nature. She'll take care of it, and then you don't have to worry about it.
All right.
Chainsaw is good with those finicky Ganoderms that you're trying to figure out. You want to look for those melanoid bands is what you're looking in the middle. So, and that's like that really tough stock part. So use the right tools.
Yeah. I'm kind of, over the course of this, I've been skipping over. There's been some few comments, suggestions here and there. Usually the ones that are posted to everyone. I allow anyone who's reading in the chat to take a look at it. I can't address everything, but some of them I have been addressing. One that has come our way was a source alcohol extractor for processing chaga, and being able to use that for other ones as well, the Ganodermas, etc. So an idea as well, if you're trying to pull out some of the medicinal compounds out of your Ganodermas. I'm not sure how much one of those costs, but if anyone else has an idea, then great.
Not sure about those. Yeah, I'm used to pretty basic alcohol tincture processes, and I know folks are coming up with new gadgets to do that kind of stuff. So it's kind of exciting to see. But I know some extractors are a little pricey, so I'm not sure how much those are. Okay, $700. That's
$700.
a bit of money.
Hey,
Yeah.
I have a
cheap.
friend that takes care of me with those tinctures, and I've seen his operation. He's got washing machines and freeze dryers and things. It's quite a. I'm happy to hear that there's even newer technology coming out, but I personally don't play with those because I have friends.
Yeah, it's good to have friends with equipment. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a question here by April. I mentioned that young Ganodermas may not have developed the same medicinal compounds that you would find in a larger specimen. And is there a point where those compounds will basically start degrading on you if the fruit body becomes too old? And is there any way to really gauge that when you come across it?
I know I'm not the scientist out of the mix. I'm just a dishwasher. But generally, when I have friends that love those for medicinal reasons that I mail these things out to, and when I pick them, I generally let them get as big as they go, and you watch the pore surface on the bottom, and usually it's this pristine white, and there's just this. It's a timing thing you got to notice year after year collecting these things. Even that white starts to fade and darken a little bit. By the end of the season, it turns all brown. I generally don't collect those for medicinal reasons, but there's that magic moment where you still have that pristine white and catch it right before it changes. That's I don't know the science behind it on the medicinal aspects of where it degrades, but I've seen to do very well at that point to collect.
Yeah,
I would just hazard a guess basically that like most of the stuff that's bioactive in a polysat or in a mushroom is the stuff that prevents it from getting degraded. So if it looks old and nasty, don't collect it.
absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. It's like those are the compounds that are protecting the mushroom. So as soon as you see the mushroom starting to look old and withered and yeah, they're obviously have degraded and they're no longer there and functioning anymore. So if it looks, young and happy and vibrant and full of life, then that would be the time to be harvesting it, because that is the essence of it you are collecting. So yeah.
And I wanted to spin back. Somebody asked about having the dried and then powdering it, and there was something in regards to that, and not necessarily on the Ganoderms in particular, but I've noticed with other toxic mushrooms and ones that have certain compounds, they last a decent amount of time just dried if you have the whole fruit or slices in Ganoderms cases, but that degrades slightly over time. I have noticed that powdering and saving that for extended periods of time, that seems to have degradation faster than the fruits being kept whole. I just wanted to mention that. I know from other mushrooms, not necessarily Ganoderm, I would assume the same through a lot of funguses. That's what they do.
Yeah, the more surface area you have exposed to oxygen, the faster everything is degrading, oxidizing. Same with all other herbs, anything else, whether especially, your aromatic herbs, you start powdering things, you're going to lose that flavor, which is the medicinal compounds. Those are going to be oxidizing and losing their potency. So try to keep all of your mushrooms and everything whole until you're ready to use them, and then powder them is my suggestion.
Mine as well. Totally agree with that. I never knew the science behind it, a little bit, but it's just from my experience in taking these mushrooms, I've noticed the difference.
Yeah, it's that oxygen, those oxidation and all that is not good. Speeds up the aging process, basically.
We got 4 questions, and then we're going to wrap it up. So for anyone who doesn't have any or has some more questions, unfortunately, time's kind of run out. We're supposed to be ending nowish, but I still have a few questions hanging out, so we'll get over those first. So has anyone done anything unique with Claveria delphis? In general, I fried them up and they're nice and sweet, but hoping to take it up a notch.
No, that's what I've noted. But the confectioner sugar kind of flavor that these things have. But I've only seen it a handful of times, and it's kind of cool in the field. But I've personally never collected enough to really play with. But yes, when I do, and if I do, it's the sweetness factor. That would be a dessert mushroom.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them in Alaska, and I really wanted to try them because I've heard that they have that sweetness. I'd probably do some sort of pan sear, and then deglaze, maybe with a little bit of like butter, maybe make a pan caramel kind of thing. So like cook them, then throw some sugar in, let it caramelize, and then hit it with like a little bit of brandy, and then light that on fire, and then like throw in a little bit of butter and cream kind of thing, and just let those simmer in that, and then throw them over a crepe, or like a riff on a crepe Suzette, but a mushroom crepe Suzette, something like that might be fun.
It wouldn't be a Suzette anymore, Mr.
I know.
I memoed that comment earlier. I heard that.
Next question. How long can you keep reishi before you make tea from it?
It depends on how you store the tea. I mean, you can
Go-
you can freeze it after you make it would be the best approach, but just like anything in your fridge, you know, eventually you're going to develop some mold and things on it, and then you're going to throw it out. That may what, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe if you're lucky.
Yeah, and then or you can dry it, you know, cut it up into small pieces and dehydrate it, and then you're good for quite some time. But you know, fresh is always best. But dehydrated ones, you know, the shelf life of dehydrated mushrooms is pretty long, so they're going to hold on to that all those medicinal compounds for quite some time. So if it's been around for a while, go ahead and make some tea still. You know,
How
better.
much? You said a long time. How much time are you talking about? Like decades?
I'd say like 2 years is a good. They can go longer than that, but 2 years is a good kind of benchmark. Go ahead, Jess.
I mean, I've had friends admit they've had a few mushroom bags or containers of mushrooms around for something around like 10 years and say they've aged wonderfully. I don't know firsthand experience on that, but
Spike, don't
Candy
you
cat
have
mushrooms
amanitas?
get stronger.
And going back, you know, veering just a little away from the Ganoderma discussion, I noticed that the bitter boletes, we have Talipilus phellius around here, which is very common and it's everywhere. After you dry them, after about 6 or 7 years, and you reconstitute them, they're no longer bitter.
ooh, that's interesting.
This is why I'm asking about how long, you know, there is some degradation in there, but that bitterness really goes, because those things are like really bitter, especially after you cook them when they're fresh. But I've noticed, you know, after these years go by, I mean, I have jars of mushrooms that I got some old mushrooms, let's just say that much. But yeah, something I noticed, you know, just going back into the science, something happens in there, you know, after that 5 year mark somewhere, and you can actually eat them at that point.
I wonder, I wonder if maybe some aromatics are being released a bit more effectively after that time or something. I don't know. That's interesting. I'll have to think
Yeah.
about that.
But going for a medicinal aspect with Ganoderma, about 2 years is your shelf life to get the biggest punch.
Sticking with the Ganodermas, one of the next questions is whether a lengthier time steeped in alcohol is preferred, or is there a sweet spot for steeping them in the alcohol?
I always recommend about 6 weeks. But you know, you're gonna get alcohol is a great preservative. You can keep anything in alcohol pretty much forever. But yeah, once they've extracted as much as what's in there, I would say like 6 weeks is probably that sweet spot. That's kind of a general rule for a lot of traditional herbalism practices. Yeah, but if you want to let it go longer, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not going to go bad. You're not going to have anything wrong with it. I've done tinctures where I've just left them sit and steep for you know, a year or so. So, you know, no really hard fast rule there, especially when it comes to traditional herbalism practices.
At the same time, if you don't want to wait like, 8 weeks and you want it, you could probably get away with doing a pretty good extraction in about 2 weeks if you break it up more and give it a regular shake. So the more agitation, the more surface area, the more extraction you're going to get. And most of that extraction happens pretty quickly. The equilibriums will like set and then, it's pretty much set. But you, as Jess said, you can just let them go forever also.
All right. So last question, kind of to end where we started. It's on hedgehogs. Going back to the hedgehogs. Hedgehogs, do you find that they get bitter when the teeth get a little longer?
Yes.
I'd say that's pretty true for a lot of mushrooms. I find they get bitter as they age.
Once they darken and get a little more dried out, then the bitterness comes in, same as like a lion's mane or hericium. You can always trim that stuff off though, because it's usually fairly superficial. If it's throughout the whole mushroom, then it's just not worth eating.
I agree.
Spike agrees. Stamp of approval.
They couldn't have said it better right there.
All right, perfect. So I think we're gonna leave it there. Dawn, would you like to say something? 3, 2, 1. All right, we're gonna leave it there. So I'd like to thank everyone, Gordon, Jess, Spike, as well as, of course, all of our attendees who joined us this evening. I'm sure we all had a fantastic time. And yeah, any parting words from panelists?
Eat
This
more
was a
mushrooms.
I want to wish everybody a happy Friday the 13th that's coming up. Watch some scary movies and happy Halloween, y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Happy fall. Hopefully everyone's foraging some great stuff out there. And yay NAMA.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic evening. And we'll see you again sometime soon, hopefully. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.